to feel less alone. At one of my sickest moments, I heard the ICU doctor in the hall say, I was trying to die on him, which made me angry. Because although I know it probably wasn't apparent from outward appearances, I was actually trying very hard not to die. And I thought it strange that he would attribute that intention to me, that he would put himself on one side and me on the other. And as incensed as it made me, I recognized myself in that statement. It was how I had viewed myself. I thought of myself as a barrier between my patient and their unstated goal of death. The generations before yours did not train physicians to be intermediaries between their patient and the disease. Physicians were instead trained to be the representative of medicine, the authority, the leader but not the guide. Even by the time I entered medical school in the late 1990s and we had switched away from the paternalistic model into one of shared decision-making, we still represented medicine. We didn't know, we weren't wise enough to know that we had to separate ourselves from medicine and set it to the side so that we could examine the options together through the lens of patient values. You may already know that. You have the wonderful advantage of training at an institution that values active listening and other attributes of the healer on attending to and representing your patients. You may be far ahead of where I was. I hope you are. Even if you know all of that, even if you're light years ahead of where I was, I want you to be very careful not to allow the training to disembody you. Stay connected to your own emotions, even when they're difficult. Because once physicians are disarticulated from their emotions, it becomes very hard to acknowledge and tend to the emotions in the room. And not being able to tend to your patient's emotions, not being able to be a healer, can be incredibly isolating. We all know the statistics of suicide and attrition and alcoholism. They're not getting better, despite the best efforts of well-meaning institutions. Spend time listening to your thoughts without judgment. Observe them, write them down if you find that it helps, share them with others. You'll find you're never as alone as it may seem. As you may have noticed in gross anatomy class, we are all remarkably similar beneath the surface. Recognize when your narrative is overly self-critical or self-defeating. Learn to be kind to yourselves. Practice self-compassion. Allow your brain to fill with empowering thoughts. Those thoughts will become the road that you travel and what you build your life around. Medicine is so storied, so venerated. We have such a rich collective history. And yet, in so many ways, you must not let our past actions guide you. You must forge a new path. Because to meet the challenges ahead, you will need to fundamentally reimagine the role you will play in your patients' lives. I had to reimagine what kind of physician I would be to my patients. I found a humility there in partnering with them. I found inhabiting the role of humble Sherpa much more authentic to me than any sort of perceived authority. I knew the path through illness. I could chart it for them. I could predict the pitfalls and setbacks. The thing is, I knew all of that before. I just didn't know how much our patients needed us to light the way. I didn't know to value that partnership. And I didn't know how much in turn we needed them. I didn't know that by spending time in the dark spaces with my patients, that it would deepen our relationship. And it would be there that I could truly participate in their healing process. That they would let me into a far more cohesive relationship. One that would open channels of compassion and empathy that were bidirectional. That in serving them in their time of greatest need, we would help each other to find meaning and purpose. My patients held the answer to the question of resilience. It's just not where I thought it would be. My identity as a physician was wrapped up in illness, but not as I had believed. It was not in the diseases themselves, but in the humanity of the suffering. The wound is the gift. So you see, in the same way that we can co-create a plan of care with our patients, we can actually co-narrate our role in each other's lives. The knowledge is bidirectional. The empathy is bidirectional. Our roles can be shaped by each other. I'd like to share with you one of my favorite poems. I keep it above my desk as a reminder of the sanctity of each life, and as a reminder to pause and reflect and honor each life as it passes. It's by Kay Ryan, who was named the US Poet Laureate in 2008. And it's called "Things Shouldn't Be So Hard," although I think the message is quite the opposite. A life should leave deep tracks, ruts where she went out and back to get the mail or move the hose around the yard, where she used to stand before the sink, a worn-out place, beneath her hand the china knobs rubbed down to white pastilles. The switch she used to feel for in the dark, almost erased. Her things should keep her marks. The passage of a life should show. It should abrade. And when life stops, a certain space, however small, should be left scarred by the grand and damaging parade. Things shouldn't be so hard. Take time, always, to reflect, but especially when you experience loss. There's a proximity to loss that we as physicians know, and its omnipresence can make it easy to ignore. Choose to honor it instead. As you go forward, question the status quo. Forge new paths. Honor all that proceeded before you by elevating medicine back to a position of partnership, a place of humility, and a very human willingness to witness suffering in all forms, even if that suffering is your own. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Awdish, for that highly personal, deeply moving reflection. I'm reminded a little bit of our own Leonard Cohen, who once said, "There's a crack in everything, and that's where the light gets in." So thank you again. It was beautiful. I'd like to move on to the student body. We are now going to hear from someone whose white coat ceremony was 2 years ago. So Mr. Artem Gassimian is going to talk to us from the class that's graduating this year. Artem?